There you go. So there's this story. I don't know if this joke is funny, but I heard it, and I like to start with something funny. So this guy was in his Mercedes-Benz, like a big, nice car. And this old Ford Granada, which is like a boat, like the car I had when I was 16, pulls up beside him and rolls down the window and says, "Hey, hey." And so the guy looks at his old car and he says, "Yes." He says, "Do you have a telephone in your car?" He says, Yeah, I have a telephone in my car." He says, "Oh, okay. Hey, do you have a TV in your car?" He says, "Yes, I have a TV in my car." He says, Hey, do you have a pull-out bed in your car?" It's like, "No." The guy says, "Oh, well, I guess Mercedes aren't all they're cracked up to be." And he drove off. Well, that really got under the rich guy's skin. And he just thought, he's like, that ain't right. For that old car to have a bed and I don't have a bed. So he pulled up to this custom car dealer. He said, "Can you put a bed in my car?" And the guy said, "Sure, we'll put it in the trunk and you can fold down the seat and you can take a nap if you need to." He said, "Great." So he gets it installed. It costs thousands of dollars. He's driving around town and he sees that old Ford Granada. He's like, "I got to tell him I've got a bed in my car." So he pulls up and he starts to knock on the window, but the windows are all foggy. He's like, "That's a little weird," but he says, "Well, I'm going to do it anyway." He knocks on the window, and after a while, the guy rolls down and says, "What do you want?" He says, "Well, you remember me? You stopped and asked me if I had a bed in my car." "Yeah, I remember you." He says, "Well, I got a bed now." He says, "That's great. You got me out of the shower for that?" So we went on a little mission trip to Pennsylvania to learn about how to do mission work. And I tell you, when I was, I guess you're always studying to be a pastor, but when I was learning how to be a pastor, this pastor told me, you got to focus on 5 things that the church does. You know, I talk about it all the time. You got to focus on worship. You got to preach how to worship because we don't know how to worship. You got to focus on outreach. You got to focus on people's relationships. And there's a time to focus on discipleship. We got to do this and this. And then there's a time to focus on service. But if you don't intentionally write it on your calendar, this month I'm going to focus on this, you'll let the coffee social or this project or that project, and you'll never get around to talking about the stuff that you really have to teach people. So I had outreach on this month. And we have a lot of stuff going on this month, but I had outreach, and we had a big mission festival on how to reach out to people. 5 different Lutheran denominations, 150 people came to this. We had a guy from Africa whose TV show is shown to 17 million people, and he spoke and he taught and he opened the scriptures to me and I guess the others like I had never understood things. And so I'm still processing that. But the point is, we focused on outreach. And so when I read what today's scripture was, I thought, well, how does this teach us to reach out to others? And then I thought to myself, maybe it's not about how we reach out to others. Maybe it's about how God first reached out to me. So then I read these Matthew 7, like we all read. I called them the 10 Commandments because there are 10 things that Jesus is telling us to do, right? What was the first one? Judge not, right? That's kind of like a commandment. And there was 10 of them. I thought, well, that's interesting. And then the Holy Spirit spoke to me, and I had a parable that explained these 10 Commandments. I didn't get the name of the person, but his initials were Roland Brockwell. Once upon a time, Roland Brockwell saw an old house that was run down and was cheap and nobody wanted. Everybody said you should mow that house down, but Roland knew that he could fix it up, sell it to someone, make them happy, make his family a profit, and employ his whole team. But Roland was the only one that saw that. Again, this is completely anonymous. I don't know who the Spirit's talking about. This first commandment, do not judge. If y'all been in the Bible study, a few months ago we did a study on judging. There's 7 different words for judge. Like, if I go and I pick up a banana, you can judge that banana. The Greek word, they have 7 words for judge, is like, well, I can't use that banana to eat, but maybe I can make a pie out of it because it's got spots on or something like that. You know, I can use it for my smoothies, but I can't cut it up and put it on display, right? So you make a judgment, and there's nothing wrong with that kind of judgment. You can also see somebody mugging an old lady on the street. And you can say, wow, well, I think that's improper. I think that's wrong. You know, you're making a judgment call and that's okay. Or you can have like a referee say strike, right? You say it's in the box or outside the box, it's okay. Well, this word for judge is a permanent word. It means you basically say there's nothing you can do with that person. I'm going to put the label on them worthless, damaged goods, remember, and I'm going to throw them out. Well, Roland did not do that with that house. Everybody else wanted to mow it down. But he said, I'm not going to judge that house. I can do something with that house. I'm not sure what I can do, but I can do something. The second commandment is, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in someone else's eye? And so Roland went to this neighborhood, and he saw his neighbor's house had a shutter that needed to be painted. And this neighbor needed their grass cut. But Roland did not go to those houses and say, hey, you need to clean up your house because I just bought this property. He didn't do that. He refrained from looking at the other people's problems, and he focused on the house he had bought. Third, how can you say, Dick read this for us, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye? So Roland didn't march over there and knock on his neighbor's door and say, if y'all would improve your property, my property would be worth more. Instead, he focused on what Aaron said, fixing the house that he was trying to save. Then finally, Trudy told us, if you ask, it will be given. And Roland knew he couldn't fix his house by himself. So he called JR, and he called Brian Jolly, and he called friends that he knew, and they came in and they renovated that house. They pulled down old walls. They brought in new appliances. And then, because I read what Jesus told us, anybody who asks is going to receive. If you ever need a favor, call Roland. He'll do his best to come help you. But he also knows he can call people, and they will do their best to come help him. Then the seventh commandment, Mary read to us. If you, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, don't you think God knows how to give you good stuff? I did not mean to say Roland's name over and over again, but then once I got the story going, we'll just keep it up. So Roland knows how to give good gifts. He knows how to help his son make a good house. He knows how to make a good house for him and his wife. He knows that he doesn't know who the family is that's going to buy this house, but he knows in his heart what a good house would be like. And if Roland knows how to give a good gift, don't you think God knows how to give us a good gift? Then Barbara read, so in everything, do to others as you would have them do unto you. So Roland builds that house and renovates that house as if, you guys do know that Roland renovates houses, right? I'm just not making this up. As you would want your own house. So he knows, he doesn't know the family, but he knows he's going to treat them like his own, even though he doesn't know them. And then Ashley ended and said, enter through that narrow gate. Focus on your house. Just focus on doing the work that has to be. Don't get distracted. You know how building a house is. You get to Lowe's or Home Depot, and a $1,000 trip becomes a $4,000 trip. Oh, I wish I had that nice tile. Oh, I could have that new carpet. It's only 29 cents more a square foot. But when you lay it in the whole house and you buy that extra pad, so you got to stay focused. You got to keep that budget in line. Otherwise, the project is going to be a bust. So I thought about these 10 commandments while we're reaching out to other people. Because what I realized is we are that house that Roland bought. God looked at each of our lives, and he saw something that was flawed and had problems, and in some cases, nobody wanted it. And God looks at us, and he doesn't judge us. He doesn't throw us away. He doesn't start giving us a bunch of orders. Do this, clean yourself up. God says, come to me just as you are. Bring your problems to God, and God is going to provide the solution. Bring your problems to God because God is giving you the promises. I realized in catechism class, Haley, this is where you have to answer for me. In catechism class, there are 10 commandments we're studying. But actually, the 10 commandments do not start with a thou shalt not. The 10 commandments start with a promise. What is the promise? Does anybody remember from catechism that the 10 commandments start with? The first words in the 10 commandments are, and we always forget this because we jump to the rules, right? You got to do this, don't do this, don't do this, right? But that's not how the 10 commandments start. The 10 commandments start with these words. I am your God. Period. So when you break commandment 1, I am your God. When you break commandment 2, I'm still your God. 3, I'm there for you. The commandments where we think we have to reach out and get people and say, you need to come to the Lord. What we really have to remember is the first thing we have to say is, all you got to know is that God is for you. God is on your side. God is already your God, even though you aren't God's people. So I flipped back to the first page here of these promises, and I started reading them thinking that way. God's promises to Noah. God's promises start in his heart. God is a feeling God. Just like we have emotions, we have feelings, God has a feeling. It says in his heart, he said, I am never going to again God regretted that. He said, I'm never going to again curse the ground. What was he talking about there? When did he curse the ground? Adam and Eve, right? He's talking about, remember, he got in a fight with people? Okay, there's three main fights here going on. Adam and Eve messed up in some way, and he gave them all these curses, right? He said, get out. The ground's going to be, you're going to have to work hard, sweat of your brow. It's going to be hard having children. And then he had a sit-down discussion with Cain and Abel, right? Because they were fighting, and Cain killed Abel. They were brothers, but one killed the other. And he said, he basically said, you're responsible for your brother. And Cain said, I'm not responsible for my brother. Am I my brother's keeper? But the first line there, it says, in his heart, he said, never again will I curse the ground. He said, I know that the inclination, every inclination of a person's heart is evil since they're children. That means, Hunter, you're young, right? But you still mess up, right? And you don't just mess up by accident. You like inside know you're about to mess up and you still... He knows that about us. He tried to punish us and it didn't solve the problem. So what he realizes now is, in my heart, I promise you, I will never curse the ground. I'm not going to make your life hard just because you're hard-headed. I'm not going to curse you just because you're cursing me and everybody around you. God starts with a promise. Then he moves and he says, and now I'm looking at this flood, and I will never again destroy all living creatures with the water. And then you think, well, now God's going to lower the boom, right? He's sort of lowering the gun. He's saying, well, here's what I'm going to do, and now it's your turn. But what does he say? God then blessed them. He said, be fruitful, increase. Now, to my thinking, that's exactly the opposite of what you want to do. If you have a problem child, you do not want to have more problem children. You usually want to get the good kids, and then when you have a kid who's a handful, you want to stop. But God is looking at his problem children. He's saying, I know you're going to have problems. I know you're going to mess up. But I just want you to have more and more kids. I want you to have more and more stuff. I want you to spread out all over the earth. We'll find a different way to solve this difficulty. And then you think he would maybe give us a timeout. Or say, now Noah, if you would just stay in this area and do exactly what I say, you'll be good. But he doesn't say that. What does he say at the end of that reading? Alan read, I now give you everything. The God of grace thinks exactly opposite we do. We do something wrong and we think God's going to take something away from us. And what we find is that God gives us more and more. He thinks, his theory is that if I just love them and keep loving them and promise them and promise them and promise them, that no matter how hard bad they behave, my love is going to lift them up. And I look at, when I heard the readings today, all week I've been thinking of these readings. Okay, Dave, think about yourself. Think about yourself. How is this speaking to me? How can I focus on me? How can I just do what you're telling me for me and not worry about everybody else in the world, right? Because that's what he's basically saying. Then he gets to the next section where it says God demands. And I thought, okay, here comes the boom. He's going to lay the rules on us. This is where he gets hard. But all he demanded was one thing. He said, I'm going to hold you accountable for the life of other people. Wow, that's a pretty big, easy rule to follow, right? I haven't killed anybody today. But you notice that he talked about blood a lot in that section. You might not remember it, but I'll read some of it. He said, you must not eat meat with the blood still in it, or your lifeblood I'll surely demand. I'm going to demand an account for lifeblood. Blood in the Old Testament used to be a dirty thing, right? If a woman gave birth to a baby, because she had blood, she was like ostracized. She had to sit in a tent by herself for a certain amount of time. King David was God's favorite, right? But he had blood on his hands. He had killed people. And what did God say to him? Because you have blood on your hands, you cannot build my temple. I love you, David. You're the king of my heart. My Messiah is going to come through you, but you have blood on your hands. You are dirty. You can't do this good thing. All through the Bible, we see blood as something that's so special, so precious, but also something that defiles us until Jesus turned it all around. Jesus came to us, reached out to us, and he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my blood that used to make people dirty and unclean that you couldn't eat, and I'm going to cover you with my blood. I'm going to pay the price. God said he's going to demand an account. I'm going to pay that whole account for you. Every bit of it is on me. My blood for your life. That's the deal. And he saved us. That's how God reached out to us. So then I got back to those 10 commandments. And I started thinking how God saw me, this rundown house. If I had not been called to be a Christian when I was actually... Ryan, how old are you, buddy? 13. I was about 13 when I went to a dude ranch in Scott City, Kansas. I rode horses for 2 weeks and fell on cacti and all that stuff. And this guy got up and he said, if you will just open your heart to Jesus, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to fix yourself. You just say, Jesus, I let you come into my life. And I said, you know what? I'm 13 years old. I'm just a kid, but I'm also kind of a young man. I'm ready to accept Jesus. You can't hear what I'm saying? I need a microphone. Ann, can you not hear what I'm saying? I'm not going to move you up to the front. I'm going to talk louder if that's okay. And when I was 13, I said, yeah, if that's the whole deal, if that's all I got to do, Jesus, come into my life. You got me like I am, everything I'm not, everything I'm going to be. I am now your problem. Welcome to my mother's world. And so when I reread these 10 commandments from Jesus, I got a whole different picture in my head. A whole different image of what it meant to live according to Jesus' rules. Because you read that last verse. Enter through the narrow gate. Small is the gate, narrow is the way. And what do we always think of when we hear that? We think you better be perfect. You better mind your P's and Q's. You better dot your I's and cross your T's. Because if you're not going through that narrow gate, you're not going to make it. You got to wear the right clothes. You got to go to church all the time. You got to say the right things. There's all kinds of narrow gates we have, right? You got to have enough money. You got to have enough looks. You got to have enough smarts. You got to know all the music. You got to do all the right things. That is not what Jesus was saying. As I reread that narrow gate, I said, let me shut my mouth and my mind and listen to what you just told me. And he said one thing over and over and over and over again. Mind your own business. Did you hear that? Judge not, lest ye be judged. Why do you look in the speck? How can you say to your brother, you hypocrite, first take your own plank out? Ask God to help you do these things, because you can't help but judging people around you. And everyone who asks will receive. If you know how to give good gifts, don't you think God's going to give you the power to not judge? And in everything, treat others like you want them to treat you. Bam, 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 bam. He says over and over again, the narrow gate I'm talking about is not being a busybody. Not worrying about the person that hurt you. And we've all gone through personal tragedies. Not worry about the job stress. And we all have stresses at job. Not worrying about the personal worries that just pop up in life. The Bible does not say that Christians will never have any hard times. The Bible says that Christians will go through those hard times with God. We go through the same stuff that any other family goes through, any other group goes through, any other person goes through. But we do it with God right there, holding on to us, reaching out, because we, like Peter, had walked on the water. We thought we were hot potatoes, but then we looked around, we got worried, and we started sinking. And who reaches in but Jesus, and he grabs us in a big bear hug, and he pulls us out of the water, and he puts us back in the boat where we're safe. So the way is very narrow in life. And what I've been focusing on this week, and if you want to follow my example, I can't say it's a perfect example yet, but I've been trying, and I'll tell you what, it's given me peace. So instead of thinking the people that have offended me in my personal life, or the difficulties I have in my professional life, or worrying about all the news about where this airplane is, or the politicians that say this, that, and the other, or worrying about anything outside my control, I've been focusing on what I can do. And here's the freedom of that. I don't even have to judge myself. Sometimes you look at yourself and you say, I've messed up so much. Nobody loves me. Everybody hates me. I think I'll go eat worms. I'm just going to give it up. But then I read this verse and he says, don't even judge yourself. Don't even throw yourself out. Accept yourself the way God has accepted you. And God is going to bring you to some... I've said it so many times I feel like a broken record. He is going to bring you to some incredible place in your life that you have no idea what He's doing with you, because He has a special purpose for you on this earth.